Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds, striping the kitchen with lines of soft light as Ethan Carter stood over the coffee pot, waiting for it to finish brewing. The quiet hum of the house surrounded him, the kind that used to feel comforting but now seemed unnervingly hollow. He poured his coffee, added a splash of cream, and stirred slowly, watching the faint swirl of steam rise from the cup. The faint glint of his wedding ring caught his eye, a band he once wore with pride but now couldn't help feeling burdened by. He glanced at the clock, 7:15 a.m. A decade of marriage had etched their mornings into a predictable rhythm. He could almost set his watch by Sophia's routine, the way she'd emerge from their room with purpose, hair tied back, ready to tackle her day. But lately those mornings felt different. The little changes were hard to miss: longer showers, more time at the vanity, and outfits that seemed chosen with care she hadn't shown in years. It gnawed at him like a splinter lodged too deep to pull out. Right on cue, footsteps echoed upstairs, followed by the faint creak of the bedroom door. Ethan's eyes drifted toward the stairs as he sipped his coffee. The old familiarity was still there, but it was shaded now by a creeping unease. Sophia appeared minutes later, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood as she made her way into the kitchen. She was dressed sharp, like always lately, a navy pencil skirt and a cream blouse that fit her just so, her dark hair swept neatly over one shoulder. She glanced at him briefly, her gaze cool but distracted, before heading straight for the coffee maker. Her phone was already in hand, her fingers moving quickly as she typed out a message, her lips tugging into the faintest smile. "Morning," Ethan said, trying to keep his tone casual. "Morning," she replied without looking up, her attention fixed on the screen. "Breakfast? I could make eggs," he offered, hoping to fill the space between them with something familiar. "No time," she said briskly, grabbing a travel mug and filling it. "Big day. Presentation's at 10, and I've still got revisions to go over." Ethan nodded slowly, his chest tightening as he watched her move with the same focused energy he'd once admired. "Late night, then?" he asked, careful to keep his voice steady. "Most likely." She tossed the tea bag into the mug, her new habit since switching to green tea. "I'll grab dinner at the office. Don't wait up. I could drop off lunch," he offered. "There's that Thai place you like near your building." Sophia paused, meeting his eyes for just a second before shaking her head. "That's sweet, but I've got a working lunch. Maybe another day." Her phone buzzed, and just like that, her attention was gone again. Ethan watched as she typed another message, the smile on her face small but telling. She turned slightly, angling the phone away from him as she replied. "I've gotta run," she said, swinging her purse over her shoulder. She paused at the hallway mirror, carefully touching up her lipstick, the same shade he'd bought her last Christmas, and gave her hair a quick fluff. "See you tonight." The soft click of the door closing left Ethan alone in the quiet house. He stared at the empty doorway, the cooling mug in his hand forgotten. Something wasn't right. It hadn't been for months now. He just didn't want to believe it. But the clues were everywhere: the new passcode on her phone, the extra care with her appearance, the late nights that stretched into excuses. Each one felt like a warning light flashing in his mind. Work that day was a blur. Ethan tried focusing on the project in front of him, a residential blueprint he'd been fine-tuning, but his thoughts kept circling back to Sophia. How could something so steady, so familiar, suddenly feel so precarious? "Hey, you okay?" Lucas, his friend and colleague, leaned against his desk. "You've been staring at that thing for 20 minutes. "Yeah. Fine," Ethan replied quickly, though his tightened jaw gave him away. Lucas raised an eyebrow but didn't push. "Let me know if you want to grab a drink after work. You look like you could use one." Ethan nodded but didn't respond. He wasn't ready to put his suspicions into words. Speaking them would make them real, and he wasn't sure he could handle that yet. By the time he got home that evening, the unease in his chest hadn't faded. He decided to cook Sophia's favorite dinner, chicken marsala, hoping that some semblance of normalcy might bridge the distance between them. As he moved through the motions of chopping, sautéing, and seasoning, The act felt more like a distraction than a solution. Sophia arrived just as he was plating the food. The sound of her keys in the lock, the familiar click of her heels, and the way she paused briefly by the mirror, it was all part of their routine. But when she stepped into the kitchen, her flushed cheeks and slightly tousled hair gave Ethan pause. "Something smells great," she said, setting her purse on the counter. She kept it close, though, her posture subtly guarded. Ethan forced a smile. "Chicken marsala. Figured you'd like it." Her eyes softened for a moment, but the barrier between them remained, unspoken but tangible. As they sat down to eat, the words he wanted to say stayed lodged in his throat, the weight of them pressing down harder with each passing second. "I thought it might be nice to have dinner together for a change," Ethan said, keeping his tone light as he carefully placed the dishes on the table. "It feels like it's been a while." Sophia slid into her seat, smoothing her skirt as she reached for her glass of wine. "It has," she admitted, flashing him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "This looks amazing, Ethan. You didn't have to go through so much trouble." "It's no trouble," he replied, settling into his chair across from her. "How'd the presentation go?" "It went well," she said, her fingers tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear, a habit Ethan had long associated with nerves. "The client liked our initial concepts, so we'll be moving forward with the proposal. A lot of work ahead." "Sounds like you've been juggling a lot lately," Ethan commented, pouring her a glass of red wine. "You should take a breather. I thought we could enjoy tonight without any distractions." Sophia hesitated, glancing briefly at her phone before setting it on the table face down. "You're right," she said, offering another thin smile. "Let's just enjoy the evening." The meal began, but the conversation didn't flow the way it used to. Each attempt at small talk felt forced, like they were strangers performing the motions of familiarity. Ethan watched her closely, the way her leg bounced beneath the table, the way her eyes flickered toward the phone, as if she were waiting for something. "How's the Johnson account going, really?" he asked, breaking the silence. "It must be a beast if it's keeping you out so late." Sophia paused, her fork hovering midair. "Oh, you know," she started, her tone careful. "The client has been demanding. Oliver and the rest of the team have been putting in long hours to keep up." She shifted slightly in her chair, and Ethan caught the briefest glimpse of her phone lighting up. A text. It was angled just enough for him to see it before she quickly flipped it over. The words etched into his mind instantly. "I can't wait to do it again with you in the shower." Time seemed to slow. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears as the words replayed over and over, each repetition driving a knife deeper into his chest. His hand tightened around his fork, though he barely felt it. Sophia's hand darted out to grab the phone, her movements sharp and jittery. Her fingers trembled as she tried to slide it into her pocket, but it was too late. He had seen everything he needed to see. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, his voice even. Too even. "Just work," Sophia stammered, her cheeks flushing as she looked away. "You know how it is, last-minute questions, deadlines." Ethan forced himself to nod, pretending to buy the excuse. He brought another forkful of chicken to his mouth, though it tasted like ash. The scene before him, the untouched wine, Sophia's hurried words, the half-eaten dinner, cemented the reality he had been avoiding for months. The pieces clicked together in his mind, forming a picture he wished he could unsee. "I need to prep for tomorrow," Sophia announced abruptly, rising from the table with enough force to make her chair scrape loudly against the floor. "Thanks for dinner, Ethan. It was great." He watched her retreat down the hall to the office, her plate still nearly full. Ethan remained seated, staring blankly at his own plate. His chest felt heavy, weighed down by a storm of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. The urge to confront her, to demand answers, surged within him, but he pushed it down. Not yet. He needed to think. To be sure. Later that night, Ethan lay stiffly in bed, staring up at the ceiling as the fan spun in slow, mocking circles. Beside him, Sophia faced the wall, her breathing too measured to be anything but forced. The space between them felt cavernous, their silence a reflection of the growing rift that neither dared to address. Ethan's mind wandered to their wedding day, the way her eyes shone with love as she vowed to stand by his side forever. He thought of the life they had built together, the plans they had made. Now, those memories felt tarnished, dulled by the weight of everything unspoken. As the fan continued its lazy rotations above them, Ethan resolved to uncover the truth, no matter what it cost. The next morning, Ethan set his plan in motion. Instead of heading straight to work, he parked a few blocks from Sophia's office and waited. From the shadowed interior of his car, he watched her arrive, noting how she smoothed her hair in the reflection of the glass door before stepping inside. She moved with an air of calm professionalism, but Ethan's eyes were drawn to the man who followed her moments later. He held the door open for her, his movements easy, his smile too familiar. They walked side by side, their proximity telling a story Ethan didn't want to believe. Over the following days, Ethan became a silent observer in his own marriage. He noted how Sophia never let her phone out of sight, even bringing it into the bathroom. But no one could be vigilant all the time, and eventually, her confidence slipped. During one such moment, while she showered, Ethan took the opportunity he'd been waiting for. His hands shook as he picked up her phone, his thumb hesitating over the screen. The email app was still open, the password unchanged. It was all there. The flirtatious exchanges with Oliver Bennett, each message a punch to Ethan's gut. Mentions of meetings that didn't align with her work calendar. References to private jokes and shared moments Ethan had no part of. Unable to stop himself, he searched Oliver's name online. The polished headshot on LinkedIn showed a man who appeared in his early 30s, dark-haired, well-dressed, and every bit the smooth professional. The glowing endorsements praising his charm only made Ethan's stomach churn harder. That evening, Ethan played his role perfectly. Over dinner, he asked Sophia about her day, listening as she wove a story about deadlines and demanding clients. Her words were deliberate, her tone casual. But Ethan noticed how her phone, tucked discreetly beside her plate, lit up twice during the meal. Each time, her lips twitched into a faint smile before she flipped the screen face down. The confirmation Ethan dreaded came when he least expected it. He had stopped at a coffee shop near Sophia's office, ostensibly for a meeting with a client, but his focus drifted when he overheard a conversation at the next table. Two women were chatting, their voices just low enough to suggest gossip but loud enough to carry. "Did you see her with Oliver at the holiday party?" one asked. "They were practically attached at the hip." "I know," the other replied. "He's such a player. Remember Emma from accounting? Same story, different year. But this time, he's gone after someone married. Sophia of all people. She seemed so wholesome." Ethan gripped his coffee cup tighter, the cardboard bending under his fingers. He forced himself to remain still as the conversation continued, each word slicing deeper. "I caught them last week at Murphy's," the first woman added, her voice conspiratorial. "They weren't exactly talking about the Johnson account." The women's laughter grated on Ethan's nerves as he rose abruptly, leaving his drink unfinished. Outside, the brisk air did little to cool the fire in his chest. Their words played over and over in his mind, confirming what he had begun to piece together. That night, Ethan watched Sophia prepare for another meeting. She moved with practiced precision, applying a fresh layer of lipstick and smoothing her blouse in the mirror by the front door. "Don't wait up," she called over her shoulder, her tone light and unconcerned. "Of course," Ethan replied evenly, his face a mask of calm. "Good luck with the Johnson account." As soon as the door clicked shut, Ethan grabbed his keys. He wasn't waiting anymore. Following her was easier than he anticipated. Sophia drove across town to a cozy Italian restaurant far enough from home to avoid recognition. Ethan parked discreetly and watched as she greeted Oliver with a kiss that left no doubt about their relationship. Inside, they shared a bottle of wine, their laughter drifting out through the soft glow of the restaurant's windows. Ethan stayed in his car, his fists clenched on the steering wheel as he watched the woman he thought he knew, her face alive with joy, her hand resting comfortably over Oliver's. This wasn't a fling. It was an affair steeped in familiarity and intimacy. The week that followed turned Ethan into a methodical investigator. He tracked their meetings, noting patterns and lies. Every detail painted a clearer picture of betrayal. At home, Sophia played the role of a devoted wife, but Ethan saw through her now. He watched as she transformed before his eyes, a woman he barely recognized, alive with a lightness she no longer shared with him. One evening, as she showered, she left her phone unattended on the kitchen counter. Ethan's heart raced as he picked it up. The screen lit with a new notification, a message from Oliver. "Can't wait for Thursday." "The usual spot?" The words sealed it. Any shred of doubt was gone, replaced by a cold certainty. Ethan placed the phone back where he found it, and sat down at the kitchen table. The raw anger that had consumed him in the beginning was gone, replaced by something far more calculated. He wasn't going to confront Sophia in a fit of rage or storm out in defeat. No, he had a plan now, a plan to make sure they both understood the depth of their betrayal and the cost of their actions. Ethan picked up Sophia's phone with deliberate care, his jaw tightening as he stared at the screen. He had made up his mind, tonight was not the time to act. Not yet. He needed more. Calmly, he memorized Oliver's number before placing the phone back exactly where it had been. Upstairs, the sound of running water masked any noise as Ethan stepped toward the living room window. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the quiet street bathed in warm evening light. The serene view felt like mockery, a stark contrast to the chaos inside him. Later, lying beside Sophia in bed, Ethan stared up at the ceiling. Her breathing was steady and deep, but he knew she wasn't asleep. The space between them on the mattress felt vast, a chasm he could no longer cross. He thought about everything they had built together, the trust they had shared, the plans they had made. All of it lay in ruins, scattered by her betrayal. His chest ached, but his resolve only grew stronger. They would pay, not through fury, but with precision. A storm was coming, and he would be the eye of it. The next morning, Ethan's plan began to take shape. His home office transformed into a command center, his desk a battlefield of evidence. Photographs captured Sophia and Oliver at intimate dinners, sneaking into hotels, lingering in dark corners. Screenshots of their messages painted an unmistakable picture of infidelity. Each note detailing times and places further cemented their betrayal. Among it all, Oliver's phone number scrawled on a yellow post-it stood out, daring him to act. Sophia's phone buzzed again that afternoon, left carelessly on the counter while she stepped outside to water the plants. Ethan picked it up, his expression neutral as he opened her messages. Slowly, methodically, he typed, "I need to see you tonight. Ethan's working late on the Harrison project. Come to the house. Don't want to wait for our usual spot." Oliver's response came almost instantly. "Risky, babe. Your place? What's gotten into you?" Ethan's stomach churned, but he forced himself to respond in the same tone Sophia might use. "Miss you too much. Door will be unlocked. Let yourself in. Want you in my house this time." A reply popped up seconds later, each word slicing deeper. "I love this bold side of you. See you at 8. Can't wait to feel your hands on me." Ethan deleted the conversation, placing the phone back as it was. The clock read 2:05 p.m., just under 6 hours until Oliver would walk into the trap. In his office, Ethan made a call. "Lucas," he said evenly, "I need a favor." "What's up?" Lucas replied, the sound of papers rustling faintly in the background. "If anyone asks, I'm working late on the Harrison project tonight." There was a pause. "Why? Something going on?" Lucas asked, concern evident. "I just need you to cover for me," Ethan said, his voice firm. "Can you do that?" Lucas hesitated before sighing. "Sure. But seriously, Ethan, if you need to talk." "I don't," Ethan interrupted, his tone cold and final. "Just handle it." He hung up and leaned back in his chair, surveying the evidence one last time. Everything was falling into place. By tonight, Sophia and Oliver would realize they weren't as clever as they thought. They'd face the consequences of their deceit. At 6 p.m., Sophia arrived home, moving through the kitchen with a nervous energy she couldn't fully conceal. Ethan leaned against the doorway, watching as she adjusted her makeup at the mirror. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with a fleeting smile. "I might hit the gym later," she said, her voice light but forced. "I'll be at the office late," Ethan replied, his tone measured. "The Harrison project needs attention." She nodded quickly, relief flickering across her face. "Good luck with that," she said, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her shirt. By 7 p.m., Ethan made a show of gathering his briefcase, stuffing blank papers inside. He kissed Sophia's cheek lightly, noting the faint tension in her posture. "Don't work too hard at the gym," he said. "I won't," she replied hurriedly, already pulling out her phone as he stepped outside. Ethan drove around the block, parking his car out of sight before returning to the house. At 7:55, the living room was dark except for the faint red glow of the security cameras he'd installed a week earlier. Everything was ready. At 8 o'clock sharp, the front door clicked open. Confident footsteps echoed down the hallway, unhurried and sure. Ethan sat motionless in the shadows, listening as the figure approached. The footsteps paused briefly near the staircase, as if taking in the surroundings, before continuing into the living room. Ethan didn't need to see him to know it was Oliver. The sound of expensive leather soles on hardwood confirmed it. Ethan inhaled deeply, steeling himself for the confrontation to come. The trap had been sprung, and now, it was time to deliver the consequences. Ethan reached for the lamp, flipping it on with a deliberate motion. The sudden light bathed the room, making Oliver freeze in the doorway, one hand midair as if adjusting his tie. He was younger than Ethan had imagined, early 30s, with a carefully groomed appearance that screamed effort. The confidence on his face melted into confusion, and then fear as he locked eyes with Ethan. The fantasy he'd been entertaining crumbled in an instant. "You must be Oliver," Ethan said, his voice calm in a way that was far more dangerous than any shout. "Come in. We need to have a conversation about your relationship with my wife." Oliver hesitated, his eyes darting toward the front door like a cornered animal. "I think there's been a mistake," he stammered, stepping back a fraction. Ethan stood slowly, his imposing frame a stark contrast to Oliver's more compact build. "No mistake," he said coldly. "Sit. Look, man. I said sit." The edge in Ethan's voice cut through Oliver's protest like a blade. The authority in his tone left no room for debate. Reluctantly, Oliver sank into the armchair nearest him, his usual charm replaced by a thin veneer of fear. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quickly, his words tumbling out in a rush. "This is obviously a sensitive situation." "Sensitive?" Ethan let out a low, humorless laugh as he stepped closer. "Trouble wasn't walking into my house uninvited. Trouble was sending her those texts while she sat across from me at dinner. Trouble was making me clean up after the mess you've made of my marriage. No, Oliver. What's happening now? This is called consequences." Oliver opened his mouth to protest but faltered under Ethan's glare. "She said things weren't great between you two," he muttered, shifting uncomfortably in the chair. "That it was basically over. I didn't think." "Exactly?" Ethan loomed over him, his voice dropping to a growl. "You didn't think. Or maybe you didn't care. I've done some digging, Oliver. You've got a history, don't you? Married women. Vulnerable women. How many husbands have you done this to?" Oliver paled visibly. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ethan smirked, his expression razor-sharp. "Emma from accounting? Or was it Lisa in marketing? I've heard the stories. The office playboy who preys on weaknesses and wraps it up with a charming smile. Tell me, do you actually believe your own excuses, or do you just tell yourself what you need to sleep at night?" "This is insane," Oliver said, standing abruptly, his voice rising as he tried to reclaim control of the situation. "I'm leaving." Ethan's hand shot out, gripping Oliver's shoulder and forcing him back into the chair with startling ease. "Not yet." His voice was low, deliberate, and unyielding. You're going to hear exactly what kind of man you are. Oliver flinched but couldn't muster another attempt to rise. You're out of line, he spat, though his tone betrayed the fear simmering beneath. No, you're out of line, Ethan snapped, leaning in close. You walked into my life, my home, thinking you could do this without consequences. That ends here. Oliver's bravado cracked completely. What do you want? He asked, his voice trembling. Ethan straightened, pulling his phone from his pocket. I want you to understand the destruction you leave behind. He held up the screen, displaying a carefully curated collection of texts, photos, and emails. This is your legacy. You've left a trail so clear a blind man could follow it. One email to your HR department, and you'll be lucky to sell used cars by next week. Oliver's face turned ashen as he took in the evidence. Please, save it, Ethan said, cutting him off. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to disappear. No goodbyes, no explanations. You're going to block her number, avoid her at work, and if she so much as glances in your direction, you'll remember this moment. This is crazy, Oliver muttered weakly, dabbing at his split lip with a trembling hand. Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. You haven't seen crazy, Oliver. But if you ever come near my wife again, I promise you'll regret it. Oliver scrambled to his feet, his composure in tatters. I'm done. I'll stay away. Good. Ethan's gaze bore into him as he gestured toward the door. Now get out. Oliver bolted, his footsteps echoing through the house before the front door slammed behind him. From the window, Ethan watched as Oliver fumbled with his car keys, peeling out of the driveway in a panicked rush. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with everything unspoken. Ethan exhaled slowly, surveying the room with a clinical eye. A few droplets of blood had stained the floor, and the coffee table was slightly askew. He set about restoring the space to its pristine order, wiping down surfaces and ensuring the security cameras had captured everything. This wasn't just revenge, it was insurance. His phone buzzed on the counter, a message from Oliver. I won't say anything. Just leave me alone. Ethan deleted the text without replying, his lips curling into a grim smile. Phase 1 was complete. At 9:15, headlights swept across the window. Ethan sat back in the armchair, cradling a glass of whiskey as he waited. The front door opened hesitantly, and Sophia stepped inside, her eyes widening when she saw him. Ethan? She asked, her voice sharp with surprise. I thought you were at work. Sit down, Sophia, Ethan said evenly. His tone was quiet but steely, commanding. The look in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. The reckoning had begun. We need to talk about Oliver. The blood drained from Sophia's face. What are you? Don't. Ethan cut her off, his voice sharp and steady. His grip tightened around the whiskey glass in his hand. Don't insult me by lying. Not anymore. Ethan, please, she stammered, tears welling in her eyes. I can explain everything. Explain what? He snapped, rising from his chair with a suddenness that made her flinch. The late nights? The gym sessions where your hair came home perfectly styled? Or the texts about the shower while we sat together at dinner? He pulled his phone from his pocket, holding up the damning messages. Her tears spilled over as she shook her head. It wasn't, I never meant to get caught, Ethan finished, his voice icy. That's the only thing you're sorry about, isn't it? That your perfect little affair didn't stay hidden. No! It's not like that. Sophia stood, reaching out for him, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. I love you, Ethan. It was a mistake. Please, we can fix this. There's nothing to fix, Ethan replied, his tone cold and final. He stepped closer, towering over her. Your lover just left this house with a bloody lip and a very clear understanding of what happens when you cross me. He's not waiting for you anymore. Her breath hitched. What did you do to him? What I needed to, Ethan said simply, turning toward the stairs. He paused at the bottom, his voice hard. Pack your things. I want you out of here tonight. Ethan, please! Sophia cried, her voice breaking. Where am I supposed to go? He turned to face her, his gaze frigid. Not my problem. You made this choice, Sophia. Now you can live with it. Her desperation shifted to anger. If you throw me out, I'll tell everyone what you did to Oliver. I'll go to the police. Ethan laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Be my guest. Tell them how your married lover showed up at my house uninvited. Tell them about the texts, the hotels. I'm sure that'll play great at your office. Oh, and don't forget, he added, holding up his phone. Everything is recorded. Every lie, every betrayal. It's all here. Sophia's shoulders sagged, and she sank onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. No, Ethan said quietly, his voice cutting through the room. You're sorry you got caught. Sorry your comfortable life is crumbling. But you're not sorry for what you did. He turned and climbed the stairs without another word. Pack your bags. When I come back down, I want you gone. In the bedroom, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the sounds of her packing, drawers opening and closing, hangers scraping against the rod, muffled sobs punctuating each movement. His phone buzzed. It was Lucas, checking in. Ethan ignored it, focusing on the moment. An hour later, he heard the front door close softly. When he descended the stairs, the house was silent, emptier but somehow lighter. On the coffee table, Sophia had left her key and a handwritten note. Ethan pocketed the key without reading the note. Whatever justification she had offered no longer mattered. His phone buzzed again. Please don't do this. We can talk. I'll do anything. Another followed. I love you, Ethan. And another. Where am I supposed to go? My life is here. Ethan blocked her number and deleted the messages. He poured himself another whiskey, letting the stillness of the house wash over him. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was a grim satisfaction. The betrayal had been met with consequences. The next morning dawned gray and cold, mirroring Ethan's mood. He sat at the kitchen counter, staring at a business card, James Walker, divorce attorney. He had kept it for weeks, knowing this moment was coming. His phone vibrated with new notifications, missed calls from Sophia's blocked number, desperate texts from unknown numbers. Ethan ignored them all. He picked up the card and dialed. Later that morning, the doorbell rang. Ethan checked the security camera feed, spotting Sophia pacing on the porch. Her makeup was smudged, her clothes wrinkled, and her hair disheveled. Ethan, she called, her voice cracking. Please, we need to talk. Let me in. Ethan watched in silence as she pressed her forehead against the door. I have nowhere else to go, she continued, her voice trembling. Oliver won't answer my calls. My credit cards aren't working. I tried to get a hotel room, but… Ethan cut her off, speaking through the door. Our joint accounts are frozen. Lawyer's recommendation. You can't do this, she shouted, her voice rising. I helped build this life. Everything we have. Everything we had. Ethan corrected, still not opening the door. At least let me in so we can talk properly, she begged, pounding on the door. This is still my house too. Ethan opened the door abruptly, causing her to stumble back. His expression was cold and unyielding. Actually, it's not. My name is on the deed. I bought it before we were married. And I'm guessing you didn't read the prenup that carefully, did you? Sophia's face crumpled as realization set in. Ethan's voice remained calm. Your choices brought you here, Sophia. Now deal with them. With that, he closed the door, leaving her outside. Sophia's face crumpled as though she'd been struck. Fiancé? She repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. He never said. Of course he didn't, Ethan said coolly, leaning against the doorframe. But I'm sure she'll be very interested in the emails I sent her, along with the receipts and photographs. Oliver's made quite a habit of ruining lives, hasn't he? Yours, his fiancé's, but not mine. Not anymore. Sophia clutched her designer purse tightly, her knuckles widening. "You're enjoying this," she accused, her voice shaking. "You're punishing me like this because you can't let go." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "No, Sophia. I'm doing this because actions have consequences. Something you apparently forgot while you were playing house with your coworker." Her tears came harder now, her body trembling as the weight of everything crashed down on her. "I was lonely, Ethan. We were drifting apart, and you didn't even notice." Ethan's laugh was cold, sharp, devoid of any warmth. "Lonely? And your solution was to blow up our life? You didn't come to me. You didn't ask for counseling, or time, or anything. You chose him. Over and over again. Now you're reaping what you've sown." "I made a mistake," she choked out. "I know I was wrong. Please, Ethan. Let's find a way to fix this." "Fix it?" Ethan shook his head, incredulous. "There's no fixing this, Sophia. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed everything we built. Every promise you made. You destroyed it." Sophia slumped against the porch railing, looking more defeated than he'd ever seen her. "I have nowhere to go," she whispered. "I can't go home. My friends, they'll know. I can't." "You should have thought about that before," Ethan interrupted, his voice cutting through her excuses. "Your comfort is no longer my responsibility." She glanced up at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of mercy. "You called my parents? You told them?" "Yes," Ethan said without hesitation. "Because they deserve to know. Just like you deserve to face the truth about the mess you've created." Sophia straightened slightly, trying to salvage some dignity. "And Oliver? What about him? Are you going to ruin his life too?" Ethan tilted his head, studying her. "Oliver's life was already a mess long before I came into the picture. But yes, I made sure his company knows about his extracurricular activities. And his fiancée? She knows too. Consider it my good deed for the day." Sophia's breath hitched, and she covered her face with her hands, fresh sobs racking her frame. "I can't believe you'd do this," she said, her voice muffled. "I can't believe you'd stoop so low." Ethan's voice was calm, measured. "Low? Sophia, I didn't stoop. I documented. I protected myself from people who thought they could take without consequence. That's not low. That's survival." She lowered her hands, her face streaked with mascara and tears. "Is this really it?" she asked, her voice hollow. "After everything we've been through? This is it," Ethan said firmly. "You ended it the moment you chose him over me." Sophia's shoulders sagged, and she nodded slowly, as if the reality was finally sinking in. She turned to leave but hesitated, looking back one last time. "I'll never forgive you for this," she said, her tone venomous. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "I don't need your forgiveness, Sophia. I needed your honesty, and you couldn't give me that. Now I'll take my peace." She stared at him for a moment longer before turning and walking down the driveway, her steps unsteady. Ethan watched her go, the weight of the confrontation settling over him like a cold fog. He didn't feel triumphant, but he didn't feel regret either. It was done. He stepped back inside, closing the door softly behind him. The house felt emptier now, but lighter too. For the first time in months, the air felt clear. Ethan returned to the kitchen and poured himself a fresh glass of whiskey. He sipped it slowly, letting the quiet wrap around him like a balm. The storm had passed, and now, he could begin to rebuild. Alone, but free. Sophia staggered back as if Ethan's words had physically struck her. He's engaged?" 3 years, Ethan confirmed, his tone detached. "Long distance. She was very interested in the photos I sent her. Especially the ones from your little getaway at the Riviera Hotel. You know, the marketing conference you told me about? You've ruined everything!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "No, Sophia," Ethan said, his voice sharp as he held out the envelope again. "You did that. Take these papers. Read them. Sign them. The faster you do, the faster this ends." She snatched the envelope from his hand, trembling with anger. I could fight this. I'll get a lawyer. With what money? Ethan's expression didn't waver, almost bored with the exchange. The prenup is very clear about infidelity. You walk away with what you brought into this marriage. Subtract your shopping habits from that, and it's not much. Her face flushed red with fury. I helped build your career, Ethan. All those late nights, the client dinners, the networking events, I was there for all of it. And while I was doing that, you were spying on me? Violating my privacy? How dare I? Ethan's sharp laugh sliced through her protest. You drained our joint account to fund your affair, lied to my face every single day, and now you're upset because I found out? You don't get to cry about privacy, Sophia. She bit her lip, tears streaming down her face, but her voice hardened. People make mistakes, she said, stepping closer, her tone softening. Haven't you ever made a mistake? A mistake? Ethan's voice turned cold, his gaze unrelenting. Forgetting to pay a bill is a mistake. Leaving the stove on is a mistake. What you did, meeting him, lying to me, sneaking around for 6 months, that wasn't a mistake. It was a series of deliberate choices. And now, you're facing the consequences. What about counseling? She tried, her desperation rising. We could work through this, rebuild trust, make things stronger. There is no we, Ethan said firmly, pulling the envelope back out of his pocket. These are divorce papers. My lawyer will be in touch. Sophia shook her head, fresh tears spilling. I don't even have a lawyer, she said, her voice breaking. I don't have anything. You've frozen all our accounts. Joint accounts? Ethan corrected. Your personal one is still active. Oh, wait. His eyes narrowed. You emptied that on hotel rooms and lingerie for Oliver, didn't you? Her hand shot up as if to slap him, but Ethan caught her wrist mid-swing, his grip firm but not harsh. Don't, he said quietly, his voice laced with finality. You lost the right to touch me the moment you let him touch you. Her wrist fell limp in his hand before he released her. What am I supposed to do? She whispered, her shoulders slumping. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem, Ethan replied evenly. You're a resourceful, college-educated professional. You'll figure it out. My parents will never forgive me. She choked out, fresh despair flooding her voice. They already know, Ethan said, his smile razor-sharp. I called them last night. Your mother cried. Your father asked if the prenup was still valid. He seemed relieved when I said yes. Her mouth fell open in horror. You didn't. Oh, I did, Ethan confirmed. Just like I sent Oliver's fiancée a detailed summary of his extracurricular activities. Did you really not know about her? Her face crumpled, and she let out a broken sob. I didn't know, she murmured. He never said? Ethan shrugged, his tone devoid of sympathy. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? He lied to you, just like you lied to me. Sophia glanced at the divorce papers in her trembling hands, then back at Ethan. Is this really it? She asked, her voice hollow. After everything we've been through? Ethan's expression softened, but only for a moment. It didn't have to be this way, he said quietly. You made a choice, Sophia. And this is the consequence. Her sobs grew louder, but Ethan remained unmoved. Your clothes are in garbage bags in the garage, he added, along with all the lingerie receipts I found. Funny how your taste improved when you had someone else to impress. Sophia's lips quivered as she whispered, You're being cruel. No, Ethan replied, his voice steady. I'm being honest. You might want to try that for a change. Without another word, he stepped back and shut the door, locking it with a resolute click. Through the security feed, Ethan watched Sophia linger on the porch, clutching the divorce papers as tears streamed down her face. Eventually, she stumbled to her car and drove off, the taillights disappearing into the night. Ethan turned away from the screen and poured himself a whiskey. The house was quieter now, but it no longer felt suffocating. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted. The storm had passed. Now Ethan could begin to rebuild, alone, but free. Inside, Ethan poured himself a glass of whiskey and settled into his favorite chair. The house felt different now, no longer weighed down by betrayal, though not quite a home yet. It was quiet, still, almost peaceful. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. A message from Lucas lit up the screen. "Drinks tonight? You've been a ghost lately." Ethan stared at the message for a moment, his lips curving into the faintest smile. After a brief pause, he typed back, "Give me 30 minutes." As he glanced around the living room, the changes were subtle but significant. The furniture had been rearranged, the security cameras taken down, their memory cards tucked safely away with his lawyer. The room no longer felt haunted by the confrontation that had unfolded within its walls. Ethan leaned back, reflecting on the weight of what he'd lost and gained. His marriage was over, and with it, a certain innocence, the naive belief in promises, in the permanence of love untested. Trust, once shattered, might never fully return. But he'd discovered something else: resilience. He'd faced betrayal head-on, refusing to let it define him. That strength, that clarity of purpose, was something no one could take from him. Before heading out, he picked up his phone one last time. A new message had arrived from an unknown number. He didn't need to read it to know it was from Sophia. With quiet resolve, he swiped to delete the message and blocked the number. It wasn't anger anymore, it was closure. The chapter was finished. The book closed. Ethan grabbed his keys and stepped outside, the crisp night air brushing against his face. Behind him, the house stood silent, its rooms waiting to be redefined. It wasn't the end of the story, just the end of this one. As he drove to meet Lucas, a quiet determination settled over him. The future was uncertain, uncharted, but one thing was clear: no one would ever make him question his worth again.